Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Plan Commission meeting. I'm Tim Janacek, the chairman. We have an agenda that we're going to follow. And if you choose to speak when invited to do so, I'll ask you and then I'll remind you later to please state your name and address so we have a record. So I will formally call the Plan Commission meeting to order when we start with a roll call, Madam Clerk.
Yeah.
Here.
Aaron Christensen. Here. Carlin Kai.
Here.
Dave Hageman.
Here.
Chuck Soul.
Here.
Gina Larson. Here. Jessica Farmack.
Full attendance. This has been provided with the written draft minutes from the clerk for our last meeting, February 21. Very motion to approve or not.
You.
All right. We'll vote all in favor of approval of the minutes from the February 21. By saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion granted and the minutes are approved. Thank you for those. That is our period for public comment. These are items that we would not act on tonight as a matter of taking action, but we would love to hear from you if you have something you'd like to address the plan. Remember, I'd like to make a statement in public. People are, well, your hand is up. I thought you were going to say.
Sorry, I was just trying to be polite.
Oh, yeah.
Laura Wilmot, 5596 Wind Ridge Road, Oregon. So I've been in here, I don't even know how many times about my property at 5596. And I saw the plan proposal, which does contain the language that I was recommending, so thank you. But there was a piece missed, which was on the new zoning map. Since my lots were zoned incorrectly, I had come and we had talked about fixing that zone as part of the new zoning map so that it would then be zoned correctly. And I don't see that that was done. So just bringing it back to you guys to take another look at that because it's currently rated an RR2 and should be an R1.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Stephanie, do you have enough information there to pass it on to the
Yeah,
right people?
absolutely.
Thanks.
Good. I don't believe it was intentional, but.
Oh yeah, I know there's been a lot going on.
Okay. Anyone else would like to speak during public comment? All right, we'll throw the public comment. We move on to the next item on our agenda, which is discussion and possible action regarding the amendment to the land use plan to allow for an additional home site at 5431 Lincoln Road in Oregon, owned by Deborah and Don Toffey. I see Mr. and Mrs. Toffey are present here today.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for submitting your written proposal. It's been shared with the members of the commission. Is there anything else you'd like to add in support of your application? Realize you've been here several times before, but if you care to summarize it, please take the floor and tell us again if you want.
I'm Deborah Toffey. And I guess, I mean, like you said, we've been here several times. We've submitted it several different ways. We hear your guys' side, we, presenting our side. We'd like to build a house on, up on the hill on the far west side of our property to allow a family member to move in and help us do farming at our age that we're getting and to keep the farming going on our land. I guess we're asking that you guys, I know everything you keep bringing up on saying that you got to be fair to everybody and stuff like that. And nobody's ever going to be 100%. Because everyone's you're going to satisfy. Back in '94 when you guys made the change, not 100% of us were all happy about it and stuff. So I guess we're just open and hoping that you guys are open to change. We know you guys need income coming in to help pay the bills. I've heard about, having the 230 some people that have sites, buildable sites or whatever, but they haven't been building on them fast enough at least to bring in the income that you guys need to cover the bills. So we're asking that you kind of look at the other people that are still left out of that section and move on to try and I guess satisfy us as well as could be satisfying other people. I mean, you guys can control it by allowing only so many builds per year or something. I don't know what else to say.
Pretty much. Is there anything else?
I guess that's about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, we've read the written documents that you submitted. Thanks for turning those. Everybody's got the background on this and also for your prior presentations. Thanks for that. Anybody on the commission have any questions or care to get the discussion started about whether or not to approve the request, which is 20 acres. They're zoned in farm preservation 35. They don't have any splits left, but they would like to create a 2-acre lot. Stay within the family, at least it's the initial proposition. And it's located on Lincoln Road, which it's within the territorial zoning jurisdiction of the village, the extraterritorial jurisdiction. So they'll have something to say about this. But it's before us to decide whether we're going to recommend it or not. Anybody have any questions? Any concerns they'd like to talk? Just-
Well, I think that it would reflect the needs of the town and hopefully I think the values of the existing comprehensive plan and our values to clearly delineate some exceptions where, especially where that it would support aging in place because socially, societally, there are not enough resources to provide for all of the people who are aging boomers, or people who have chronic illness. I think, especially people who are farms, because that's such physical work. And I myself have been in a situation where I had experienced chronic illness and had to contemplate what's going to happen to these horses. And, you know, Oregon loves horses. I love horses. The Coffees have horses, and I love seeing that their horses are okay every day when I drive past. It's you know, a lot of physical labor and it's a very long-term commitment people often make to these animals that can live to be 35 years. So you do age with them. And I think that it would be really nice of us to make accommodations for those sorts of situations. I think that we should really find a decision.
Thank you, Jessica. Any other member of the commission have something to add?
I'll talk.
Chuck?
My concern is just about consistency. I think if we're going to apply a rule, we have to have consistency in that rule and not have it be discretionary in that could lead to lawsuits, it could lead to unfair or perceived unfairness in the whole process. Since this is in the ag transition zone, and it's my understanding the Village of Oregon has already approved it. And we're in the process of developing this plan to grant the exception for their property. We can do it now, but what happens if somebody comes to us in 6 months and we say we want to do it? We have to amend the whole plan to do that again. I think it makes sense if it's in the ag transition zone, if we can think about this and somehow come up with, and if the village approves it, we can maybe take a look at it. That might be the better rule than just doing this discretionary. We're going to amend the plan to allow for this house or that house. That's my thought on this.
Sharon, you have a thought on this?
I do. My thought is, as we stand right now, our current land use comprehensive plan does not allow for it. We either do an amendment to the current plan, which to me is not advisable right at the moment, just because we are trying to finalize an updated comprehensive plan. If we're going to make a change, let's put it in our new comprehensive plan and address those parcels that are smaller in size and make it part of that new plan and then move forward. Then we aren't playing favorites. We aren't being discretionary in any way. It's just the way our new plan will read versus the way we currently read. To take the time to try and amend the plan and go through whatever is involved in amending the plan. And then we're still in the process of trying to finalize our updated plan. Let's do the updated plan. Make it a part of that new plan and move forward.
Make what a part of the new plan? Could you be a little more specific?
To accommodate lots like theirs, if that's what the Plan Commission decides they want to do.
When you say lots like theirs, do you have in mind like it's a hardship or it's a unique
No.
situation or what?
No, I don't want to call it that. We're saying that these other 4 and 5 acre lots and 10 acre lots that are in a zoning category that doesn't allow them to be split, they're residential. But we know how many 4 acre lots are out there that could be split. Okay, right now, yes, they could be, I guess. But if we make the change to incorporate all of those smaller parcels to create an extra building site. However, the Plan Commission would just set the criteria for those. Whether it be the 10 acres like Steve Rudd has, or the 5 acres that Dave Dillman has, or whatever. I mean, there's probably lots of lots out there like that people would like to have a division. Okay, let's incorporate that into the new plan.
We have, I do want to discuss this with everybody who might have a point of view on this. It seems like the trend or the way we're coming up with a new code or new plan that identifies places that can build and places that can't build, have a lot to do with just designating a spot on the map by indicating color.
Right.
What would be wrong with just taking, I believe these folks' color now is a shade of blue, a dark shade of blue, just changing that 20 acres to a different color and saying it's done. Approve the whole plan, and now they're in the orange, which would let them do that.
If that's what the commission and the town board decides on, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Because it does seem like it's, I guess, if it's just a matter of changing color, it should be pretty easy for us to do. It might be too easy for us to do. Maybe we need a more rigorous process to make sure it's a good decision, but in terms of what the new plan, how the new plan would be amended to accommodate this, what we envision and change.
I don't know that I would call it amending the new plan. We're just updating the plan. That's an amendment. Is, to me, is an additional step. Where if we're updating the plan, we're updating many things in the plan. But that's a possibility. That's probably something that the commission needs to talk about.
At the moment, it's in the hands of the town board because that's what we made our recommendation to already.
Yes, but it also comes to public hearing where, because to me, it's not finalized, this copy that we sent to the town board is not necessarily the final approval. Right. Yeah.
Anybody else have a comment for me?
Jessica does.
Yeah, Jessica.
Um, well, I guess whether it's in the comprehensive plan. Or some sort of amendment or I'm picturing something that, some wording where you would have consistent with the values that are already expressed in the plan, but additional wording recognizing the current situation demographically of the town. With farmers farming sort of receding like a hairline, as it were, and an aging population and climate change, recognizing, maybe it wouldn't be those three things, but those are the three big ones in my mind. Another big one might be the tax levy, which we talk about a great deal. But having clear criteria for making exceptional decisions, whether it's whatever size the lot is, and then having very clear understanding that this would be one additional for this purpose. So it'd be very purpose driven and it would be connected to very specific stated values that would just be updated from the values that are already expressed in the plan. Does that make sense? That's what I would personally like to see. In print, and everybody would understand what these criteria are and what it means to get approved. It'd be just one node, for example. And it would get away from this very valid concern that of fairness to all. But I think that if fairness is only one thing, which is the same rule applies to everybody uniformly across the board, I think that sounds a bit bureaucratic, and it just doesn't allow for really good decision making in some cases.
I haven't heard any specific criticism of the idea behind Mr. and Mrs. Talker's plans. How to go about it, is it possible? And in the long run, is it wise policy to make an exception for a single property? I kind of summarize that.
I'm curious
Gina?
how I don't disagree with a lot of what's been said, but I wonder how exactly we go about it. I think it's one thing to agree with something in concept, but how do we execute that? And I understand putting parameters. I do think, changing the new plan versus amending the current plan is probably the way to handle it. But when you talk about putting parameters on those decisions, the decision making for the outliers, I guess, or the exceptions, that's one thing to, put some boards on your decision. But how do we implement that decision moving forward after the decision is made? Like, what's our, if someone comes to us and says, I have this specific thing that right now that meets your current criteria, and we approve it, and the next day the criteria change, or the situation changes, that there's what happens? Like,
Well,
we don't have any,
I think that will probably happen. But that if you just allow, say, going to risk, essentially, that's kind of a risk management question. It's like, it doesn't mean that the same property owners, maybe in a different iteration of owners, they bought and sold, can come and say, I need another building and another building. It would be limited in scope so that we could live with this decision regardless of whether the purpose changes. And sometimes the purpose will change and sometimes it won't. And maybe we would want to do some sort of study of, previous decisions where somebody came and put forward a proposition that where the factors and facts of the situation changed over time. Has it been our general? We may have an impression that our experience is that we get duped But that may just be because those are the things that stick in our minds. You know, if we're gonna really have that concern, then we should do some real empirical analysis of what the facts are. Because I suspect that, yeah, occasionally we'll get duped, but at least as often, we'll be doing something really good. And if we limit the risk, it'll be something we can live with.
I may just add, the thing that makes this somewhat easier for me to handle, it's in the ag transition zone. If the Village of Oregon approves it, it makes it easier for me to approve it because the village is the one who's gonna take over this land, right? They're eventually gonna annex this land and maybe take it over. If the property's in the transition zone, they present something to the village says, okay, I'm more inclined to accept that because the village knows what they're giving up and we're getting a home on a piece of property with taxes where most likely we wouldn't have that home with taxes in the future. So to me, that makes sense. To have all of these, all these listings of what's the criteria is at this point, we're never going to be able to do that in a meeting, 2 meetings. It took us over a year to do the comprehensive plan. I think if we're looking at doing this, the transition zone makes sense to me. Now, can we do something like that? I don't know. It just makes sense to me. Maybe it doesn't to you, and that's fine. But that's where my thought process is on all this. The Village of Oregon approves it. Great. We got another home in the township, at least for a while, that's getting taxes, and the village doesn't care.
I don't disagree with that. I think they're almost two separate things in my mind. Like what you're saying, if you're kind of saying it doesn't, the criteria doesn't matter. Like the situation doesn't matter, not the situation, the personal situation. The social is irrelevant. And what we're saying is that these properties that meet these criteria be in this boundary. If the property owner chooses that they can have that opportunity to grant that potential. Generation, multi-generational housing, farming, whatever.
If they are in the transition, you're saying, or
Yeah.
what's the roof then?
Yes. At least that just makes sense to me, because otherwise it's too hard. It's too difficult
Yeah.
to come up with a.
That's a clear line to me.
That's just my. opinion.
Does anyone have, David, yes.
So what we came to the town board, made a motion last week. And my understanding is the town board did not take any action on it. They tabled it with the option to, the Tofty property is not in that, correct? So it's just saying out there. So since back in 95, we went exclusive ag, you had to have, without getting into all the details, splits available to you. You gotta have split 35 acres, you haven't built on it. Over the years, we've had people come in and ask, gee, I'd like to have another house. The town is, I don't want to use the term hardline, but we've gone by, you've got to have a split available. Sometimes, yeah, we maybe didn't like to do that, but that's what we did because that was the rule. I'm not saying that we should continue doing that. There's a need for change, there's a need for change. But I guess I would like us to get our current plan done. And I'm hesitant to make, I hate to use the word exception, but if we're gonna start looking at the possibility of allowing additional splits where they aren't available based on the current land use plan or the current zoning in the map. If we're gonna start looking at that, I would like to look at those on a one-by-one basis after we have our plan in place. And I'd like to go to Brian Standing and say, what is the best way to do this? Because he's always said, you can amend your plan anytime, you can amend your plan. So if this is where we have to amend the plan to take a hunk of land and make it available for them to build, I guess I'd like to kind of see it happen that way. I guess the other thing is, people come like for the town, and the town board has said in the past, well, no, you don't have any splits, you can't do anything. People have went up and done their density study at the county, and it says they don't have any And they come to town board meetings, the town board says, well, no, you don't have any splits. I guess I'd like to get a feel from the town board as to if we're gonna start kind of changing our philosophy on not requiring a split with the basic plan that we have. If we're gonna start going down that road, I'd like to get the township's view on, or the board's view on that. And I don't know, have you guys actually talked to the board per se? Said, what do you guys think about this?
Yes, we have.
And what was their response?
What was your response?
So back to the planning commission. That's what
Yeah,
they said.
we keep going this back and forth. We've done this since 2015, back and forth.
That's not true. They referenced the recording.
I think that you were told to go to the village.
We did.
And we did the village.
Yeah, the board told them to go to the village.
And I think the reason you're getting back and forth, and I hate to see it happen, is because of, and I don't want to see the longstanding rule, but just how our plan has been and how we've stuck to it. So, and I'm not saying that going forward, that's what the town should do, but because this is kind of a paradigm shift, if we're gonna do this and how we've done in the past, I'd like to see it handled outside, and I don't want to see our new comprehensive plan go in with one little sliver or one exception. I'd like to handle that and then potential more exceptions, you know, consistently, and see if we got some parameters. I'd like to hear what the town board has to say about this idea of, you know, in the past, we've hardline said no, but now if we're gonna be a little more lenient, or I guess that's my thought. I don't want to make one exception in to get our new plan in the new plan out of the gate. I'd like to see us talk to Brian Standing, say, here's a scenario we got, see what our town board says, see what the plan commission says about this idea. I'm not against what you guys want to do. I just want to set us up so as we move forward, we've got some consistency in this, doing this paradigm shift. I just want to be consistent with it. See how we would go about it. That's my.
We have had some advice from Brian Standing, who is our county consultant, for lack of a better term, but the expert at the county level who has been advising us along the way, and we've gotten some advice from him over the years on this very issue. And by way of summary, let me just say that one of the options that we've explored when we're talking with Mr. and Mrs. Tofty is about maybe buying a TDR, a chance development right from another source and bringing it in. We can't do that because there is no TDR within the ag transition area. That's beyond our control. It's just, they don't exist. Another possibility was that the town could allow for land divisions with going to lots as small as 2 acres. But as Brian Standing points out, that leads to the possibility of proliferation of little homesteads all over the county, thereby possibly jeopardizing the rural character of the township that everybody wants to have. So he's given us some guidance on that, and I've spoken with him myself, and I'd be happy to share with you that his thought is you don't want to get no town should get in the position of having to make one-by-one exceptions. Consistency means a lot to the whole town and not the single people who might benefit from it. And I think it's hard to say no to people like Mr. and Mrs. Tofty who have a valid, legitimate, honest reason for wanting to do this. You don't have the means to give it to them without making an exception that will so possible mischief farther down the line. I'm not afraid of doing more work. I'll call on you, attorney. Go ahead. What do you want?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question on that because I know he had talked about not making an exception, but what you guys have talked about today is saying if it's within the ability for the village to take it over, that you could have some type of language in the policy for that. And I'm just curious if he's commented on that, only because, you know, I've been doing this for over 1.5 years now, trying to get my property figured out. Village approved it almost 2 years ago already. And I'm just waiting for the town to get it figured out where we can move on it. So now you have 2 people here who have come that have these really weird things that you may have never, ever envisioned when you're going through these plans, that language could have helped. So I don't know if he's commented on that specifically since I heard it here tonight, but just wanted to call out, it would have helped both of us.
And thanks for that comment. It raises the word, that language, and it's the second or third time I'm hearing that. We don't know what language to use yet. Because we haven't been debating that as part of the development of our plan revision, so we don't know exactly what that would look like. And I think, David, you're saying maybe Brian Standing can help us come up with some wording that would accomplish what we're trying to do.
Right, so like, see, we can get some consistency so we don't have to make one-off decisions on a lot of things, setting ourselves up for legal issues, whatever.
Yeah, and it's not just legal issues. We don't want people feeling like they're not being heard and treated fairly. Yeah, we're all agreeing.
To me, it's enough of a concept or a change in ways for us that I would like to see us just get our plan done. And then the first thing we do is work on situations like top these or this idea of, okay, somebody doesn't meet the criteria of the plan. What do we need to do? Do we have to change a land use map in the plan? Or the other avenues? See what Brian, what we would have to do. I'm assuming that we have a land use map because right now it's not technically legally possible. So what has to happen to make that reality? If I'm doing that, I just like to do it after we get our plan done.
One reason, I think the main reason I invited Mr. and Mrs. Tofty to come back today one more time and talk to us is because I feel their pain when they say they feel like they're kind of getting the runaround and push from here and there. And I think maybe the best thing we can do for all concerned is to make a decision today. Process is we make a decision, we make a recommendation to the town board, and the town board doesn't say, oh, go talk to the village or go talk to the folks up in the county. There's a process in place. After the town board acts on it, then it's presented somehow to the village and they make a decision. So there's places along the way that people have to touch base in the right order. So it doesn't talk for a home run. So I want to get the top result at least headed in the right direction. And I think maybe the way to put this issue into the right direction is for us to vote on it, yes or no, whether we recommend approval, and then let the town board make their decision and take the next step after that. At least they know where to go. Mr. Top, do you have your hand up?
We were talking about consistency across the township, but we're kind of in a unique situation here because everybody out in the southern Rutherford Township West, they can't annex. The village doesn't want them. We're in that spot where they could take us. If we sell to the developer, they can annex that. Now you lose the tax base we're paying now, plus potential tax base on a new home. We don't have to live in a township. And we've had developers talk to us about selling. So we're trying to head off that. We're trying to head off keeping farmers. But anybody in the township just can't do that, but we're in that spot where we could. So I don't know about that consistency, if that works across the whole township.
And it probably doesn't apply to the whole township. It does certainly apply to people in your situation, which are within this 3 mile, this mile-and-a-half zone that the village has veto power. It's, we have our limited options. So thanks for bringing that up. It is a unique property and a unique location with other people besides the town plan commission having to say something about it. What I'm suggesting is we take a vote tonight, at least get the process started for the Tofties. Because from here, if they're dissatisfied, or not if they're dissatisfied, the next process is for the town board to take action, and then applicants have the right to go to a higher level for appeal purposes. Somebody's got to start with a decision. Because we don't want somebody to 6 months later say, we'll go back to the plan commission. Yeah, we should make a decision.
So if they go to the board because we hypothetically have a vote here and say, yes, we're comfortable with them having a building spot, we don't technically know how that's going to happen yet, right?
I don't know how.
Right.
But we can tell that to the board. We don't know how to do this, but this is a plan commission's.
So you're basically just kind of getting the board to say that somebody here wants to basically have a split that's not eligible. We'd like to see them have a split. Trying to see what the board feels about that.
Arlen is our representative on the board, so he may have something to say about
David, finish. Are you finished?
Yeah,
Okay. The plan commission has rather broad powers. And in the planning. And what I have seen is that plan commission digs into the details of the impact of such a move, just impact of what kind of policy you have that's outlined in the comprehensive plan, the kind of development that's possible, where it's possible. And we have, with that, I have seen the town board rely on plan commission making a recommendation and not waiting for the board to make a recommendation. The board ultimately has to approve the policy. But we're the ones that are supposed to be getting into the detail that makes that decision possible at the board level. The reality also is that the board is going to significantly change in a month. And that we are going to be having at least one new board member, possibly two, and definitely a new chair. That's a lot of votes. There's already some comments that new board is going to be going through the process of public hearings and approving the comp plan. So add to that, this issue of the Tofty property has come before planning commission and the board before and was turned down because they did not have a split. I think their circumstances were described as much the same thing. They have the extended family within the parcel. We turned it down then. What's different now? And I'm looking at your statement of consistency. What is that thread of consistency? I think we should be hammering that out. I don't think we should be having something that says, this is how we want to modify this, and let's put that to the board. Not leave something loosey-goosey. Well, what do you think about things in this area that would be the exception? Without having some hard facts as to what's backing it up, hard guidelines as to what it's going to do. So either we should be coming up with a yes or no method for this to happen or not happen, and make that recommendation to the board and not expect the board to be overwhelmingly wise and say, yeah, that sounds wonderful, because even if they say that, they're sending it back to us to be redone. So this is a big policy shift. Do we want, there's consistency. So I think we have to do the work and send it to the board. Yes.
So based on what you're saying, it seems like we would initially sort of need to choose which direction we wanted to go in. I would be fine. The policy change that I described, I think might be a longer term, might take longer to develop that. Perhaps than what you are referring to with the rationale being that this is a transition area and village, it behooves the town to accept this request, approve this request, for all the reasons the top of this state. I think that's what I think. And so I guess one question, so, you know, or do we want to go in that direction in terms of our reasoning? And I would also ask you, would we need to sort of how far do we need to pursue either one of those directions in order to sort of circle back to this specific question? Or could we provide a reasoning and details that you describe for, say, why we think it would be wise based on, you know, the fact that they could be annexed by the village has approved it, it behooves us to keep them in the town because for tax reasons, because their property is, you know, part of the rural character and so on and so forth. I mean, is that the sort of detailed reasoning that you would expect to provide?
Yes.
Our decision?
I believe you're on a track. You had a few little things.
Yeah,
that
no, I'm
threw
just
off
trying
the
to get
edges.
a sense of, do we have to do more homework?
I think
And
yes.
which books do we need to crack?
I think you have to do more homework because it's a policy. We could be having a policy such as the town of Verona that I believe has a goal of 15 new home sites a year. And there's another, I don't know, there's another one that has an 8 policy. We don't have a specific policy that says we want to have X number of new houses a year.
I think it's more to me like a goal.
That's a goal, but that still starts the policy. Then how do we fulfill that goal? We don't have that goal. We have our fuzzy little language of the rural character, which again is defined differently in everybody's mind. It is being defined differently and changing. So if you have a goal, I think Chuck was starting to allude to it, let's look at these transition areas and start seeing, is that the basis of an exception that would allow the Tofties to have their goal met? And that would still be something of a policy for us. I think we have to do the homework.
No, I'm happy to do homework. I just want to know.
Yeah. And I'm saying, and I'm also looking at
Clarification.
that we're going to have a massively changed town board.
Mhm.
There's going to be new players in there that are going to be playing catch up. And they're going to be, again, relying on us to be saying, the comprehensive plan is ready to be approved. Or not.
Harlan, I was just gonna say that in our current land use plan, our policy 3A says that establish a recommended guideline that limits the number of building permits for new individual single-family homes to be approved in a single year. A limit of 10 single-family homes per year is recommended.
Okay, where is that from?
It's in our current comprehensive plan.
Okay, it's recommended.
Yeah.
But it's worded as a limitation, not
Yeah,
a goal to go up to.
exactly,
It's to
right.
hold it down to.
Yeah.
So what is it?
No more than.
The town may allow additional permits beyond this guideline if the town board states that the additional units will not create an undue burden on the town's ability to provide services.
The last, say, 20 years, Jennifer, have we ever had over 10 homes back when things were good?
We have not.
No. Okay.
What's
I
the
mean,
average?
3 to 4,
Thank you.
and that goes on, but
Okay,
yeah,
but
there's something in there.
so there's a policy of up to that's in our current plan. So are we going to shoot for that? Or are we, I think that's also a way of limiting a brand new subdivision of 20, 30 houses.
How's that? Can you expand on that? What is?
It could be a way of limiting new large subdivisions.
Number 10 or something?
Yeah.
10, okay.
It was 10, correct, Jennifer?
It says, it goes, that was policy 3A, there's policy 3B, there's policy 3C, and policy 3C says, based on the previous policies in the section the issuance of more than a total of 25 building permits for new single-family homes in any given year is discouraged. The town may allow additional permits beyond this guideline if the town board states that additional units will not create an undue burden on the town's ability to provide services. So the limit's 25 if you go to policy trees.
Is that in the new plan too? Proposed
You know
new
what,
plan?
I don't know,
That's new houses,
single family,
single-family houses. There doesn't say creation of lots.
no,
No, that's just the building of the houses.
Yeah.
So there's some,
So could we? And again, I think that I'm not just like abandoning the idea of having a sort of clear separate policy for exceptions to address social needs. However, happy to put that aside, because I think that would take longer to think through and to develop. That said, if we took this other approach, would we come, could we make a motion to that effect tonight and vote on that, or would we have to go away, do something and come back with more information? What do you think?
I think it's up to you. It will be up to this commission to make a recommendation to the board or make a recommendation to ourselves to be, we shall proceed with an addendum to the new comprehensive plan. We'll start looking at one, or wait until it's over, but that this is something we want to look at, providing a rational, consistent exception. There's enough people out there who are kind of chomping at the bit to do so. Beth Cox has her 2 or 3 lots she wants to cut off as well, but cannot.
How about this?
This gentleman has come forward with his request.
Well, there are numerous people and some people may be holding back. Yeah, Chuck.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think most of us want to approve the Tofty somehow. There's no question, I think, from listening to everybody, we want to approve it. I have no problem telling the town board, I want to approve this, but I gotta find a way to approve it. And that's a difficult part of this whole thing. I just can't say to the town board, I want this approved. I gotta come up with a way to approve it for them, and I want to try to find that way to do it for them.
I think for clarification of the conversation, we're talking about not the Tofties as an example of a situation that we would be open to approving, not that we're making an exception for this one request, correct?
I think that's kind of understood. We're talking about how we're going to treat everybody equally.
Yes.
The Tofties being in that class.
The board is going to have the same question. Do you love them and then approve it? Oh, just another old family with all the strings that are getting a favor to one of the old farm families. I mean,
I
you
guess
can
we're
hear
gonna-
that argument come.
That's what I'm looking for then, is for the board to say, okay, commission, this is something we want to take a look at and see if you can figure out how to get this situation approved or not approved. You know, because it's up to the board, as you know, the board's going to be different. That's
So
what's
it's going to be very different.
You know, how are we going to approve this? And this is, they'll probably say, yeah, figure out a way.
Does it make sense what you were saying earlier, to think about it in terms of, to frame it in terms of,
I'm sorry.
I'm wondering if it makes sense. Chuck, it seemed like you had framed it earlier in a very pretty clear and concise way that took into account the transitional area, villages, approval, the advantages to the town. I mean, is there some way we can extrapolate and create a policy on that basis, or is that not something that we can generalize?
On what?
Yes, absolutely. Brian has given us several examples on how to make that happen. And one of them being where, like in proximity to places, just like subdivisions. Do you put one right next to it? You can start creating a policy just based on the location of that property, and then said properties with similar
So we could even frame it as for properties that have the option of, I mean, they could join
Just say
the village if they want to do or be. annexed by
properties
the
in
village.
ATE
Yeah.
transition, yes,
How about this?
but
Much.
But if you change the density in those areas, that also has to be approved by the village in what the density would be. The density, they're not gonna say, yes, you can put 30 homes on, they're gonna go, no, we wanna put 30 homes on it. You know what I'm saying? So there's more to it, but what I'm saying is, yes, that is possible. Yes, that's where it would start.
In the works, or at least I started down the road of coming to a boundary agreement with the village, so we can work some of these things out.
That would be part
I
of
know what they're
what
gonna
we're
do.
talking about as well.
I have this suggestion. Oh, David?
What I was gonna say, so does it sound like when we're, headed- what I'm thinking in my mind is if we want to make a recommendation to the board, say, the plan commission is open to the idea of possibly allowing for an additional split on parcels that have no splits available. So the 1/35, if there's no splits available, are we gonna kind of frame it to the board to say we're looking at possibly finding or coming up with a policy that somebody who comes before us who has no splits but would like one, that we are open to looking how to, if we want to do that, we could say some possibilities or ways to frame it are location ag transition, location to village boundaries, just give them some ideas how we might go about. I'm sure there'll be other ones, but give them kind of those ideas so they can understand maybe how we might do that. But I guess my question is, I do think we should frame it to the board that we're looking at opening up more possible building sites, because like I say, we've been 1/35, we've had people come in the past, just like the talk, these have been turned down. Okay, so if we were saying we want to maybe change that road, I would think we'd want to tell the board, we're thinking about doing this. What is your thought of that? And then give them some possible ways that we could do it. We don't know the answer, but give them some ideas that we, if they want to allow that to happen, here's how we might try to make it happen. Is that what you're trying to get to?
I think that's what Arlen is suggesting the board wants. They want to have our ideas as to how to accomplish the goal that we're setting. Or the end that we're setting.
Especially since we're gonna have a lot of new personalities there.
So may I, here's my suggestion that I've been waiting patiently for 10 seconds to say. Not really. The clerk suggested to me some time ago that because we have a busy agenda tonight, got a speaker about to take the floor. The Tofties want an answer. Maybe this is the right situation to call for what we call a work session, which is a extra calendar meeting where we get together and we chat, talk about things. It's open to the public. The audience might be listening in, but there'd be no public input. But we'd start, I'd ask everybody to do homework ahead of time and think about these issues, but bring our ideas forward on how to, what do the criteria look like, what would make sense. And then at our next meeting, maybe we could say, this is the package that we're going to present to the town board and recommend that they adopt this set of guidelines to determine what exceptions, if any. I'm suggesting that in that all of that, just that we have a work session to work this out instead of kind of flying by the seat of our pants tonight. What direction? No. Stephanie, you got any thoughts on that?
Pushing an hour on this one topic and these people are waiting to hear the presentation, so. If you guys are not ready to make a decision, then that sounds fine. It could be something, a work session to discuss just any changes to the density policy. That's what you guys are really talking about right now.
Right, because we're bound by the density policy that we have now, so what
Yeah.
exceptions or what
Yes, so you
considerations?
keep it so that you are, in all fairness, talking about actually changing density policy, even if it's for a specific area or whatnot. It wouldn't be just for the Tofties.
Might
We're
come
gonna
down to that, right?
Yes, exactly.
But I think the setting of a work session is probably the more productive way to go. Plus it'll give us time to do our homework and
If you're
think about it.
Gonna make a decision right now, yes.
If I could be. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to write a report to the town board. I'm just saying, the plan commission is gonna be looking at having a work session to be looking into exceptions to the current density of 1 to 35,
I wouldn't use the word exception. People want to stay away from exception.
okay? What is the word?
Decision process, something general to allow or consider.
Have work sessions in regard to this topic.
Policy?
And it's just density.
Yeah, we could be more vague than that because I don't want to limit what we can talk about. Including density, the current density policy.
Yeah, it's changes to the current density policy.
Change.
Or additions.
I think I've got it.
Is that okay? Unless someone has a motion to make that we're gonna have done. Doesn't sound like we're ready for a motion. Sharon,
I make a motion
what's your motion?
to have a work session to discuss our density policy or our comprehensive plan.
Is there a second? David, second, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? So I think I'm able to tell that Mr. and Mrs. Toffey that we don't have a decision for you tonight. It isn't, we haven't given you a yes or a no as to what's gonna happen. But I sense the urgency of the groups wanting to get an answer to you, and we're gonna meet and be talking about this. In a work session first and then with the town here. Okay.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank you again and acknowledge your patience and your helpfulness in getting us to go on this. We're doing the best we can, I would say.
Yes. You need to. Work on it. They have 100 chats now. Okay.
That's why you're here. Okay, ready? There's some sodas in the refrigerator if you want. It's available for rental for wedding reception. All right, thanks for your input, everybody. I appreciate a thoughtful, lively discussion. I get the sense we're moving forward on this, which is the best we can do. Next on the agenda is conditional use permit presentation by Dane County Planning. We have with us Roger Lane, who is, well, would you introduce yourself, Roger, and get us started? Without
Yes.
further ado, yeah.
Hi, my name is Roger Lane. I'm the Dane County Zoning Administrator. This is Rachel Holloway, Dane County Assistant Zoning Administrator. We're here tonight to put a short presentation on conditional use permits. Before we begin, I just want to give a little historic perspective of, it's always good to know from a beginning where we are now and we'll continue on. So in 1938, the county adopted zoning, and the zoning was very simple. It had agricultural, residential, and commercial zoning districts. It did not have conditional use permits. Everything was permitted by right. So in the agricultural area, single-family houses were permitted by right. Mineral extraction, dumping grounds, salvage yards were all in the agricultural area permitted by right. As time progressed in 1968, the county adopted conditional use permits. The first one was mineral extraction, of course, because it's a somewhat intense land use. That process was the Zoning and Land Regulation Committee had the approval authority and towns had an advisory capacity. So they would, the town would send up their concerns to the ZLR committee, and the ZLR committee would make a decision on conditional use permits. And then in 2008, rather recent, the majority of towns approved veto authority for conditional use permits, meaning that the towns had authority to approve or deny conditional use permits, not just be advisory. And since that time, a lot of towns have really liked that authority. And some, however, have second thoughts about it because it's sometimes quite stressful. So just wanted to give you that historic perspective. Rachel is going to start this the presentation off, and take it away, Rachel.
We're gonna start it. Try to respect your time tonight. Just want to thank you for inviting us here to talk about this because it is a tricky topic at times. There's a lot we could say about it, but I guess, are coming here to just really share what we think are key points, key information about conditional uses. Knowing that some of you probably know all of this already or have definitely it. Others maybe need a refresher or would just like to hear our take on it. But also just appreciate the time, and I know you've had a lot to discuss already tonight. So we'll try to get through this fairly quickly and know that we can always follow up or have other conversations. We're always available, of course. So if you have any thoughts after tonight and want to follow up, we can do that, right? And also just I want to introduce myself because I'm fairly new with the county department. I started at the county, again, my name is Rachel. I started there last July. I came on board and really my focus is conditional use permits and rezoning petitions. So I'm helping Roger and our zoning land regulation committee. So really I'm just kind of digging into this in particular, really trying to handle the petitions that come through. So happy to be here and also just meeting you in person. It's nice to get out of downtown and out of the office, do a meeting and just, see who's here. So I guess, and just really quickly, a couple things to know about me, just who I am. I'm from Upper Michigan. I grew up in the UP, so I come from a very small former mining town. And on my background, the work I've done before coming to the county, I've been in public sector government jobs. I've also done private consulting, so working for landowners, farmers and developers and townships, in those different ways as a consultant. So I bring all of that to what I do here at the county and who I serve. So you know a little bit about me since I'm a new face, probably to all of you. So what we'd like to cover really is an overview of conditional use permit or CUPs, what we call them here. How that's distinct from rezonings and what that relationship is, because that's a very interesting thing. And we often see them coming together. Certain landowners might have a rezoning and a conditional use. So how do we look at that? There's some general tips on process, just things that our staff over the years have learned what can make the process smoother and make it less intimidating, right? If things get tricky, we just share our thoughts on that. In case that's helpful, we're hoping that it is. Dig a little deeper on specifics on our timeline here in Dane County, how that process tends to work, who does what in that process. We can talk about the ordinance, what that language is specifically to guide us, and state statutes as well. Roger discussed that already in terms of the history and kind of where we're coming from with this. So knowing that it's changing, has changed at different points in time is important. And again, just tips and what we consider best practices or things that can help us get through these processes. If the towns, you don't have to act on conditional uses, towns to really approve them, deny them, or choose to take no action. If it's something that you feel like you just don't want to deal with, all of those are options. And but if you do want to take action on a conditional use and really get into that process, we have suggestions. So that's again part of this presentation. And if at any time I'm talking too fast, too quietly, too slow, whatever, just let me know, please. So yeah, conditional use, it's just one of the tools in our toolbox for zoning. The way I look at it, We, of course, the key things we have is our zoning ordinance, number one, and number two, zoning map. So the zoning map, of course, as you know, assigns the zoning district to different properties, and it really determines what can happen in that district. The text really describes the purpose of the district. It should really be a guide. We refer to that all the time. And why are the districts different? And what are the standards for buildings, parking, et cetera, what people want to do with the land? The key thing is each zoning district has permitted uses that are listed. They're permitted by right. You can do those things with your land without getting a special approval in addition, right? Maybe just a permit to build, a zoning permit as well. But conditional uses are a separate set of uses in every single district that really are kind of anticipated as being like, these might be a fit with that district. If you have that zoning, these could really work there. People already thought about that and thought that might work, but they need a little extra review just to make sure that it's right for the surroundings, right? At a particular location, particular property. That's the reason why they're conditional, right? So you get another look at it and go, does this really make sense? Next slide, please. Examples, and Roger already mentioned a couple for quarries. See those communication towers, dog kennels, short-term rentals like your Airbnb. These are all conditional uses, the kind that we see the most often, at least in Dane County. Asphalt plants, small-scale electric generating plants, and schools and daycares. That's another thing where schools and daycares compatible with the neighborhood. Generally, yes, right? But you want to look at the specific locations and make sure because of traffic and other things, right? Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. A key point on that one too is just keeping in mind that the county, at Dane County, we process about 35 to 40 conditional uses every year. So we're always doing this, right? There's a lot that we see, and typically a lot of towns only see maybe 1 or 2 per year. So that's, again, why we're here, why we offer assistance where we can, because we see a good variety in a different towns. So can bring that perspective. In terms of process and like the couple of the key differences between rezoning and conditional use permit. And I like to work with both because they're often related, right? But it's very different in terms of process. And that's a very important thing to remember. Rezonings are your ordinance amendments. You're really changing the map. You're signing a different district. That's a legislative decision that you make at the town level and the county level. It's really discretionary. You can choose whether or not to rezone a property, and there's nothing really saying you have to do it, right? You can look at your policies that you have as a town and say, does this make sense? Or does it not? You could talk about it in a variety of ways. You don't have to have a formal public hearing on it. Again, you probably know all this, but then you make a recommendation to the county board. We take that recommendation, we carry it through our piece of the process. But the key thing with that zoning, again, if you change the zoning on land, it opens the door to all manner of land uses, right? So there's a whole list in the zoning ordinance that you change that color on the map. All sorts of things could happen in the future that aren't necessarily being proposed at that time. So that's a key thing where the town has a great deal of discretion. Conditional use permits is just a strange animal. We are limited under state statutes, right? It's quasi judicial. There's a specific process. You're supposed to weigh evidence. Think of it as a tool to fine tune the zoning, right? If you decided you want to rezone a property, you've already opened the gate to all sorts of types of uses. But then a conditional use allows you to really look a little more closely at something and say, does this make sense? And if so, in what way? Or are there certain controls we need to put on it so that it's a good fit with the surrounding area, community? In process, it's also very different where it's really not as okay to have informal consultations, conversations. It's really intended that a conditional use is discussed. If someone brings that proposal, you're having that conversation in a public meeting setting where everybody can understand the facts of the situation, right? And what the request is. That's important for creating a record and something that is very easy to share, easy to document, the basis for your decisions. Towns have a public hearing on this. Here in Dane County, that's the process. We have a town hearing and a county hearing. So there's a couple different chances to have these, has to have debates and have the facts laid out. But careful record keeping is important. So again, it's a fine tuning tool. Again, in your process, you can choose to approve a conditional use, deny it, or take no action. If you approve it or deny it, you want to have a good solid basis for doing so. So that's the key thing that I always remind people. And a couple of tips, just kind of high level tips or broad ones. One is that it's really helpful to kind of separate rezoning petitions from CUPs, from conditional uses. People might submit both at the same time and say, here's what we're thinking, here's everything on the table, right? But in terms of how you put it on your agendas or review them and think about them, I separate them into two distinct buckets, right? I tackle the rezone and say, okay, I'm reviewing it with a certain lens, a certain look at it. And the conditional use, handling that separately, saying, okay, if the rezoning is to happen, that opens the door to the conditional use. Now we take that under its own terms and look at it through that process. So if you don't think that, all of the land uses listed for a certain zoning district are a good fit for that area, or you have, concerns about that, then don't rezone that property. You could stop it right there and say, no, we don't even want to open that door. Zoning stays, right? Then the conditional use proposal is just dead in the water at that point. That's one way it can go. Again, town's discretion is limited on conditional uses. That's a state statute thing where once you rezone it, the zoning is in place. Again, you have to have a really good basis for denying a proposed conditional use then. It has to be based on evidence and something that most anybody could look at it and say, yeah, I get why you denied that, right? It's if the bar is pretty high, and a lot of conditional uses, if they're challenged in courts, that basis for denying it better be solid. So that's why I keep emphasizing that rezoning, conditional use, very different, kind of a one-step, two-step. And it just makes your decisions more defensible. So if something gets challenged, you kind of remember those things. It can really help you later on, help everybody. Next slide, please. The other tip I want to share is establishing some kind of formal process for your conditional use reviews is important. So again, if you want to do this and you want to really engage in the details, to take action on a conditional use, we recommend certain things for process. And it doesn't have to be super complicated. It's just important that it's consistent, right? Maybe you set a few guidelines for how you do it, certain rules of the road to guide you in public meetings, because if things get contentious, I'm sure you've experienced that before. It really helps to just have some kind of guidelines and say, here's how we're going to conduct these meetings. And everybody knows what those rules are going into it. It can just help things stay a little smoother, even though, the debates can get heated at times. We recommend, say you want to do this as a town, you're holding public hearing. Now, a lot of cities and villages don't have their boards act on conditional uses. They just let the plan commission do it. Like Arlen mentioned, the plan commissions really are digging into the details. You really know the ins and outs of your town plan and all of the history, right? So for that reason, a lot of communities say the plan commission decides these conditional uses because it's really a detailed kind of level of decision. A lot of towns, though, bring it to their town board. If you're doing that, it could be a good idea to just have a public hearing together, like get all of your decision makers in one room. You have one meeting where everybody can hear the same arguments, right? Same facts. It can minimize the confusion that can happen as people bump along, and then they have to go to county meetings in addition to all of that, right? So it's a lot of keeping track of what conversations happen. If you can consolidate the meetings, that can go a long way to helping your local level decision makers just hear each other, hear everybody. Again, rules, maybe it's as simple as what information do you accept for public comment and what kind? Can someone send you a text message or videos? We get all kinds of things at the county sometimes. Maybe you just say, we need hard copies of this, we need a certain number, it needs to be in by a certain date. Whatever those rules are that you think will make it manageable for your staff, for your people to just take stuff in from the public when they want to share things with you. And again, for public hearings, same thing, and you might already have these rules, I'm just not familiar with them at this time, but your order of speakers, if you have a certain way you're going to do it, like at the county will say, supporters of the petition speak, you get 5 minutes, opponents each get 5 minutes, you had to register ahead of time, and we just go through it. So that's a consistency thing, right? And then we can tell people coming to the meeting what to expect. The chair will run that meeting and kind of keep things moving, but also make sure that everybody is heard and has their time to speak to the body. And if it's too controversial, we recommend postponement. Postpone that thing so it can come back later. It gives everybody time to consider what was heard in the hearing. I've seen a lot of communities, towns I've worked for, sometimes feel like they have to make a decision at that meeting, and it can really lead to kind of tortured meetings. It can be very difficult, right? Or things might even get missed. But if you feel like you need more time, just no harm you to the body often in postponing it and just letting that kind of sit, or if you need some more information, ask the applicants for that, and have them come back before you after some time has passed. And then you can make a decision at that time. Again, keeping records, it's good to keep a folder for any conditional use petition. That's what we recommend, so you have a clear record, and maybe it's your clerk that keeps that or whoever at the town, but if you have meetings on it, then you've got something. So if it's challenged, you can say, here's what we looked at and here's how we made our decision on this particular proposal. Key thing is whatever you do for process, it's a good idea, we think, to write it down, adopt it in some manner formally, and just consistently follow it. So that way you're, you're on a solid footing and you're kind of dealing with these. I'll do a little bit of a deeper dive on process, and I won't try to get too in details here, but we've got a flow chart. These are in materials that we have on our website as well. We've got handouts and we brought some tonight. So if anybody's interested, we have some good materials and things that we try to, share that helps make some sense of what can be a little complicated, but, in short, just applying at the county zoning office and talking with staff first. We always encourage people to come and talk to us about what their goals are, what they're trying to do with the property, what they think they might want to do. It's not always clear cut. Talk about it before deadline day, right? That really helps so much, and at the town level as well. And we always tell people, have you talked to the town? Instead of just getting an application dropped on and going, okay, what is this? So we get them on our agenda, but it's a couple of months out, right? And in the meantime, they go to the town. We go through a town process, have your public hearing, have a town board vote. Meanwhile, we're posting our notice in the paper as well. We're doing a class 2 public notice, getting ready for our hearing. And then we look to see if the town has taken action on it by the time it gets back to the county, and we're writing up our report and going, okay, what are our findings on this? And what are the key facts that our committee needs to know? Obviously, whatever happened at the town is pertinent to that meeting, and we want to make sure that we're clear on all of that going in. We have our public hearing. All told, the process takes about 3 months. We have our zoning and land regulation committee, or ZLR. We have our public hearing. They might act on it that night and either approve the CUP, deny it, or postpone it, and then it would come back to them at a later date. So they do that if they don't have the town action, for example, if we're not sure what's going to happen yet with the town, or there needs to be more time. Those neighbors are submitting opposition and there are concerns to be worked out, then our committee will postpone that to a later date, bring it back and see if some things can be ironed out with the different parties. And after our zoning committee acts on it, if they approve a conditional use, that's it, it's done, it's effective, and then our staff, we write it up, make sure the documentation is in order, and we say congratulations to the applicant, and they're off to the races. And the next one, it's kind of same thing, but just because they're more written out, right? We have our meetings with staff, formal application with the county. With that, eventually it also gets routed to the town. So whatever the county has in our file for that application gets sent out to the towns. Make sure you have a copy. And so we try to stay on the same page on all of that. It is unique, and I think Roger was mentioning that as well. In Dane County, for the towns to share that approval with the county for conditional uses, that's unique to Dane County. There may be other places that do it, but it's we're a unique place. So that has been working fairly well for the county and the towns to have this kind of shared approach to it. So everybody gets to look at these proposals because they can be very unique. And the town has 60 days from the public hearing to act on it. There's an option to extend that for 40 days. It's more like the technical, ways that gets worked out, but I guess I've already went through the hearing thing. If there's questions on it, we can dig into that a little bit. And decisions at the end. So if somebody is unhappy with the decision or thinks it was made on faulty grounds, either at the town or county level, it can be appealed to circuit court. And our ordinance is recently amended to send that to circuit court instead of the Board of Adjustment. And that is a common practice to do it this way.
What's the standard to review at circuit court? Do they give deference to your decision? Just curious.
I couldn't say how much difference. I think they look at the facts and the things that are on record, right?
It's a certiorari review. They'll look at how it was processed. So was there a public hearing? Was there a notice? Was there ability to act? Did they act in a rational manner rather than arbitrary and capricious? Was there findings of fact? What was their reasoning? Are the conditions enforceable? So all those factors a judge will look at.
And these decisions are verbal as opposed to written from the town and the county. The decision from the town and the county the cup is verbal generally, it's not written, is that right?
It's written in a town action report. When Jennifer sends in the town action report, there's a findings of fact that there's 8 standards that have to be met. She checks them off. So yes, there is a formal document that it's part of the process.
Thank you.
You go to the next one. Please. Just to touch on briefly, I'm not going to read all this, but a lot of it's in our zoning ordinance, but just highlighted the text in red that really is the reason for conditional uses. We kind of covered, but it's really like certain uses have potential for impacts to the neighboring properties. And it helps me to keep that in mind when I'm reviewing, and I keep focused on what are the potential impacts. If I'm not thinking about potential impacts, then it's generally something I don't need to be thinking about, right? The focus of the conditional use review is, can it harm the neighbors in some way? Is that verifiable? Is a really solid reason for that? If so, are there ways that can be mitigated or addressed in some way and minimize those impacts? And if so, that's how these things, keep moving through the process while being compatible with what that zoning district is meant to allow. Thank you. So the application, and Roger was mentioning that the 8 standards. So really, someone brings in an application, we've got a form, we have checklists, our ordinance, we talk through that with people. And of course, we say, have you talked to the town? Do you have an understanding of, is there generally support for this? Are they open to it? But there's a list, right? You have to get a legal description of the property involved so that we know exactly where on that map and we can draw it, like this conditional use type of activity would be happening here, not over there. They have a site plan. It's a little bit detailed. So people have to bring, if it's especially a commercial type of use, we want to know, hours of operation, how many employees, where are you going to park vehicles? All of these types of things need to be put in the application. It really helps a lot during the review and the decision making, because if there's not that good information, if people haven't thought it through that much, it makes it a lot harder to make the decision off it. You don't know if it will have the impacts or not on the neighbors. A map of the neighborhood, so knowing the context of it. There's new buildings proposed. We'd like to see building plans. Often a floor plan also helps just to understand, like, okay, what's happening where. Sometimes there's buildings with multiple things happening in them. And zoning administrator can also request additional information, require it as part of the application. So if you feel like, in order to understand this, I really need to see the floor plan. You can make that part of it, right? And require that of people. If it makes sense too. The town board and the zoning committee both, when they make a decision on a conditional use, it has to be based on those findings of fact, based on the evidence presented in that hearing. So important that all of that kind of comes together in the hearing. There are 8 standards. We have those on actually the next slide. And I'll just mention too, the zoning code has also set conditions language in there for different uses. So if, there's a lot of uses where we already know they're going to come up. They're fairly common. The zoning ordinance has some useful language already to say, if you're doing this type of operation, say if it's like horse boarding or some other thing, there are certain conditions already in there to say, like, these are the types of things that are usually that we'd have to require, say for a horse boarding operation, in order to address potential concerns like manure management. So just keep that in mind, that there are useful things in the code for that. On these standards, I'm not going to read them all verbatim, but I will kind of go through them a little bit here. And I will also mention one of our handouts that we brought and that we have online. We've recently updated to a little bit, is this guide for understanding the conditional use process. Love to give this to people when they come in, especially if they're new to it or haven't done it before. Say, please read this and understand here's how the process works. Of course, we sit down with them and talk through it as well. This has a guide from everything we're talking about tonight, right? From application, how long does it take, who needs to be involved in this? Then how do we review it? And so these standards that you see on the slide, that's exact language from the chapter 10 zoning ordinance. These are the standards we review it by, and as staff, we look at it and say, is there something that the applicant has given for each of these things to say, how is their proposal going to meet these standards and be okay for the neighborhood and be a good fit? what's tricky is a lot of people have trouble addressing these standards, right? It just, a normal person is not used to speaking in these ways, right? And they don't like to read ordinances. Who does? You have to be a little weird to enjoy this stuff maybe, but you know, so how, the number one, just for example, like the 1 and 2 are huge. And when I talk with people and say, it's tricky because like under the law, right? It's like the applicant has to provide the information. So I can't be helping them too much or being like, you know, suggesting things. It's like, you have to come with your proposal and have the information we need. But then to describe what you need can be a little tricky. So this guide, this document, we try to add a little more to that to explain, to say, how will it not be detrimental or endanger the public health, safety, comfort, general welfare of the community? Well, I say, well, you know, explain how your proposed use will fit into the neighborhood. You know, think about your neighbors. Is there going to be lights, you know, outdoor lighting, noise? Are you going to have outdoor storage? Traffic, what will that look like? What are you expecting? And I really ask people to provide that as part of their application, right? Like, write that stuff down or put it in a cover letter and really paint a picture for us of what will be happening on the site if you get, you know, your approvals, so that we can understand. I said, because everybody will, you know, if they don't put that down on paper and really help us see what they're seeing and doing with their land, then people can think all sorts of things and it could be a little scary, right? Think, well, what else is going to be happening out there? But the more people can give you some details, and the better it is if they have those ready. And then the second, like that the uses, values, and enjoyment of other property in the neighborhood basically won't be impaired for the uses that are already permitted. So one way of thinking of that is if your neighbors have certain zoning and certain things are allowed by that zoning, in addition to whatever's happening there now, right? They could do all manner of other things, right? Will what you're proposing on this one property hurt their ability to do those things that they already have legal rights to do, even if they haven't been doing them yet? So we got to think about the zoning of the neighboring lands and how is that a good fit? Of course, that's tricky for your average person who does normal things in their day-to-day other than zoning. But ask them to explain how it will fit in the neighborhood again, and how will they avoid potential nuisances. It could be things like limiting their hours of operation, you know, describe how the hours are going to actually be good and keep good neighborly relations. Their noise control measures, will they pave a parking area to avoid dust? These are just examples that they might include, right? But trying to help people think through potential problems that could arise based on what they want to do. Screening for outdoor storage or things that might seem unsightly to the neighbors. Those are all, you know, examples of these types of things. 3 is really about future development and saying what could happen in the surrounding area. Are you going to affect your neighbor's ability to do things that might make sense? Or maybe the town has plans, you know, to a particular area. Some towns have some business park areas planned or commercial, and or roads that need to extend in certain places, and what a particular additional use for the ability to kind of do orderly. Read about 4 is really just utilities, access, drainage, like how is the site currently served? Is there septic there now? Will there be, you know, once you get your operation up and running, what would change? So asking people to get more specific about that. And driveway, you know, if there are driveway improvements needed, get into that kind of detail. This is really the meat of it. I'm spending a little more time on these because they're just so critical. 5, the ingress egress, that's really more focused on the driveway and traffic, right? We want to know how many cars might be coming and going. There's ways to guess at that, but I want the applicant to tell me, like, okay, for your type of business, what's normal, right? And what kind of vehicles? Is there also farming happening in the area? Could there be conflicts, or how will you manage that during the busiest time for whatever it is you're doing? Asking people to think through that and really tell us how is that going to work and why won't it be a problem? 6, that their conditional use will conform to the regulations of the district. That's really saying, okay, under the zoning you either have now or what you're proposing, does meet all the standards. You just can't have conflict with zoning. That's kind of a no-brainer maybe, but number 7, the conditional use is consistent with the comprehensive plans. So state law does not require that. That's not a requirement of statutes to have comprehensive plan consistency. But in Dane County, it is part of the zoning code. We have made that, so you have to look at the county and town plans, make sure that it's a good fit with the policies you have. Then 8 relates to farmland preservation. There's another slide for that next. So if you're in farmland preservation and you're proposing a conditional use, oh, I guess. Is it not the next one? Oh, never mind, must be later in there. Did I do more than one?
Oh,
I think maybe. I think
We might have-
we went back one.
Oh, yeah, should be 15.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
there we
That
go.
one,
Yep.
like, oh, we got it wrong. Felt wrong when I did it. So there are 5 additional standards in the zoning code. So every time if it, you know, got an FP, farmland preservation zoning, and you've got a conditional use proposal, I'm looking also at these standards in addition to the 8 that are always at play. And that really just really follow the farmland preservation policies. I know you're very familiar with these. And how will the conditional use not be a problem for your farmland preservation goals? Next slide, please. You know, we can revisit this if we need to. Statutes, one key thing, and it got much discussion in recent years, of course, the Act 67 and 2017 state legislature changed some laws with regard to conditional uses. It's been debated whether or not that was a huge change because there was already case law existing, and that, you know, in terms of the courts, how they would handle these or handle disputes, there was already established case laws. But Act 67 and 2017 really put that into the statutes, made that a more firm requirement. An example is the all energy case versus Trempealeau County. That was county had denied a permit, the court supported that, but there was a dissenting opinion that I thought maybe these conditional uses shouldn't have quite as much discretion on them for various reasons, but that case was important because it established this idea of substantial evidence and more objective facts that on which to base a decision, and not just some other things that might be at play, which can, it's easy to have all sorts of things come into the decision making process. But this is trying to streamline it to say focus on the facts. I define conditional use as a term because as Roger mentioned, past years it either wasn't a thing, or when it became a thing, it was called different terms like special exception, special use, and conditional use. All these language had been applied, and it was, so now the statutes are more clear about, okay, if we're talking conditional use in the realm of zoning, this is what this means. Very helpful. It also defines substantial evidence. We have some more on that and after this one. Sets the class 2 public notice requirements. I remember when that changed, I used to be doing the class 1 notices and working with communities to do their conditional uses that way. The law changed. Okay, we need a class 2, just like rezones. Okay, so just a little more notice, you know, to provide it to the community. But if the applicant agrees to the conditions that you want to impose, so if you're getting ready to make a decision, you have conditions of approval and you're thinking, okay, we're willing to approve this, but only with this laundry list of conditions. And the applicant says, yeah, I can meet those conditions, or I agree to, you know, abide by all of them, then it shall be granted. Like that's the special way that our decision making is limited, right? So we can't just say, yeah, but I still don't like it. I want to deny this, you know, because for various reasons, like again, you gotta have a really good reason. For the state law is now saying, look, you can't just deny things on a feeling or because you're nervous about what might happen. If you can't, you know, really substantiate that, that's a really valid concern. It's a pretty high bar. Again, in terms of just the risk of if it were challenged in court, that's where that becomes important. Maybe next one. Oh, and the conditions have to be reasonable and measurable to a common person. So if it's reasonable, if it can practically be measured, the idea is the standards and the conditions that you would put on a proposed use should be measurable, should be reasonable. So you could ask like Joe Blow anywhere on the street in your town and say, does this make sense? Like, this is what's being proposed. And you can kind of tell that story and somebody could go, yeah, that makes sense. You know, I think it makes sense to require screening over here, or I could see how the neighbors would be bothered by the lights. So that condition, it's doesn't sound like it's off base, right? A little more on the substantial evidence. So it's really, again, facts and information. I look at this language all the time. I revisit it because I need to keep it fresh and I need to use it as a basis for the staff comments, even though I'm not making decisions on these. In terms of working with our zoning committee, this is a very important thing for me to keep central to my thinking. It can't be merely personal preferences. It can't be speculation. It has to directly pertain to the requirements and conditions that the applicant must meet to get their permit. Again, so reasonable persons could accept that idea. So if I get to say like, oh, this storage yard operation is okay, but needs to have some needs to look nicer, or needs to have a pretty fence or something, like, I can't say that, that doesn't make sense, it's, what do you mean pretty fence? And where, what kind of fence, how much, how high, you know?
We're trying to define rural character. So
Yeah.
I'm just, I have half a year tuning in on how people have defined these things.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's certain, you know, it's gonna help to have examples, right? You could say, this is that the kind of character we're talking about, or is it not?
Is that the kind of pretty we're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. It's so subjective sometimes, it's really hard, but the more you can have things, or if there's things in your comprehensive plan, valuable tool, right? Because we can look at that and say, oh, well, in town of Oregon, that's what they mean by rural character, or here's what they mean by like good aesthetics for a business type of operation. That's what they want to see. Here's some examples, or if there's pictures, something that, you know, we can go on to say, okay, this makes sense, or you're gonna screen something, how many trees? Every 50 feet, or is it 3 trees gonna cut it? You know, when you're putting conditions on the permit, like try to get specific and say, for this property, this would be adequate, you know, 10 trees or along this lot line or something.
So in this context, any condition imposed must be based on substantial evidence. Is the assumption that all evidence comes from the applicant? Are there any situations or any nuances in which evidence would be from the town or the county? Or would you simply ask that specific evidence and it would have to be produced by the applicant?
It's a great question, and now correct me if I'm wrong on this one. My preference is always to get it from the applicant whenever possible. But I would say there's a reason why we have the public hearing as well, and so like neighbors can come out with their own substantial evidence, and they can say, here's why I think that would affect my land for this or that reason, and the more they can be very specific, have other examples that really give more support to it. I mean, we've seen that in terms of property values. That's a very hard one to actually prove, even when you have numbers and charts and it looks legit, but it's trying to think of some other examples, you know, noise or.
Well, evidence has to be gathered, and we do have a public hearing, so the applicant has his evidence, it's the application. The general public has their written testimony as well as their oral testimony. That's evidence as well. You know, it could be fine-tuned traffic studies or something like that, but you know, you really don't need those unless you have this intense land use and the person on the street. You know, if you went, hey, he has a business with 2 employees, you think he needs a traffic study, the person on the street's gonna go, what for? So you kind of get your answer on that substantial evidence. But the burden of proof is primarily on the applicant. He has to paint the picture, he or she has to paint the picture with evidence. And it's up for the committee to decide if it meets those 8 standards. Does it fit into the neighborhood if this proposal acts this way?
I'd say sometimes staff will put things into a staff report because it's things that like the average normal person might not know, right? It'd be like, oh, well, such and such, this community has a plan to bring a road in this particular alignment, or you know, there might be some information about underground water or some, you know, well protection zones or things like that. We could bring that to bear in a staff report as long as it's presented in the hearing. I say that's part of the record, definitely relevant. So it's a mix of all of these things, really. That's what makes it so special. Yeah, we talked about can't be hearsay speculation. So you're hearing about substantial evidence, but that's the key to so much of this. And it can be contrary, right? That's the trick. You can hear things in a public hearing and both of them can be true or mostly true. And that's why we have decision makers, right? To weigh those things and say, they have a good point, but so does the applicant. And at the end of the day, who would be impacted if we make this decision, or can we put conditions on this that will address the concerns? Because if the members of the public are raising legitimate concerns and they have based that on facts, that should come to bear on the decision and the conditions that you put on it at the end, right? That's the idea, at least. Do next one. My last one before I'll hand it off here, but just some examples. So again, the drainage or stormwater very common, right? People come to meetings and say, well, I don't want my neighbor to do this because there's a runoff problem. I'm worried about some things eroding or eroding the ditch and the road. Runoff's been coming off the property and I've got concerns. Very well, maybe legit. Sometimes people have those concerns and it's not clear what the source of the problem might be. Or if the new proposed use that somebody has their application in, if that will be the thing to have negative impacts, or could there be other reasons for the impact, right? So it helps to have, say, an engineering analysis of some kind, or if they already have some permits that they're working through the process to get that. Like if I have an application, we're reviewing it, and then I look to our land and water resources staff, like say, for especially business operations, where you know they're going to need a erosion control or stormwater permit anyway. Encourage people to get their preliminary plans into them, to just give it a first look and say, does this look like it's going to work? Is it based on the right assumptions? And if their staff can say, yeah, this looks like they're on the right track, even if they haven't done all the full nitty gritty engineering, it's something to say, okay, people who understand stormwater have looked at this. They're the experts. I certainly am not. But I like to know that, you know, I can look for that and see if it's there and say, yeah, somebody has looked at this committee, so we can have some assurance that it makes sense, right? Same with wetlands. The wetlands are funny, like we look at the maps and we could say, yeah, we think there's wetlands here, or the DNR has them mapped, maybe. But unless a recent wetland delineation has been done, we don't know exactly where that boundary is. So that helps a lot. The applicant can bring in their own, the landowner, their wetland delineation, then you can really get down to brass tacks, right? Where is that boundary? How many feet from it do you need to be? If the applicant can say, yeah, here's my plan and I will be X number of feet away from it, at least 75, then we're good to go, right? And we don't have to debate whether they're protecting the wetlands, because if they meet the regulations that are on the books, to me, they meet the regulations. And I'm not going to be poking more at the wetland issue, because I would consider that to be resolved, right? If it's got legitimate documentation. Impacts of property values, again, very tricky to prove, and the courts have dealt with that in different ways, I think, but you know, basically, is there evidence? You have comparable studies, appraisal and impact studies, so certainly bringing in appraisers into it. You can't just say, I'm worried my property value will go down. Well, I'm legitimately worried my property value will go down, but that isn't going to help the zoning, you know, committee or the town board make a decision if I don't have some way of providing evidence why I think that's going to happen. We talked about traffic, we talked about ugliness. Yeah,
Are you speaking about the burden that the applicant has to prove these things?
kind of both, the applicant, but also if a neighbor has concerns and saying that my property value will go down, so I want you to deny this conditional use. You should be forcing me to give you more evidence as to why I think my property value would go down. It shouldn't be enough for me to just come to a meeting and say, stop this petition because I'm worried about property value. Because that gets said a lot.
Does the
right?
applicant have to first show that there is no impact on property value?
I would say they don't have to show it. Most often it's because the issue gets raised anyway. So I'd say if a neighbor raises that concern and they say, hey, I've got a concern about this, then it's common to go back to the applicant and say, what do you say, applicant? Why are you not going to impact property values? Your neighbor is saying you're going to negatively affect them. Then you have that, and that's often where maybe that's grounds for postponement to say, hey, this concern came out and you didn't submit anything with your initial application to address property values, or it hadn't come up yet, but now we have a new, you know, concern raised in the hearing. Give them some more time to go back and come with something is what I would do, and say, you know, how is your proposal going to be a good fit again? And then the neighbors could do the same, but they could come back and then, you know, multiple meetings on this stuff. That's where it gets a little dicey, but I think it is a good thing to do to suss it out some more and say, give us a little more to go on. We can't just say boo property values, and that can cause problems as well. We talked about that, you know, deciding for or against. Once you make a decision, you really got to have that kind of pinned down. So this, we have some more tips on just like the process, actually getting to the nitty gritty of meetings, stuff I'm sort of alluding to that you're aware of, but
Do neighbors hire their own experts, and is the civil engineer to do this, that, or that? Do you have a battle of experts often on these things? Between,
I think
yeah,
it's too common. I mean, that's quite a heavy lift. It does take money often to pay people for that kind of thing, but often it's more common, I'd say, for neighbors to go and find other studies or maybe other studies that may have been done, yeah, in Wisconsin or for other communities, and say, you know, like solar farms, we've had some debates over that. People would like EPA studies or planning association or other like venues that have studied the issue. Hopefully there's examples from different types of communities. I think that's more common, or they might get an appraiser, and I don't know actually the cost or what's involved in that personally.
Yeah, we usually get like 5 a year that people in opposition can provide more testimony, as in case studies, as well as appraisals, stuff like that. So we do get that.
Want to take over from
Yes,
here?
so my section is tips for smoother processes. The first thing is that all town officials should know how the public hearings are arranged. And so the Wisconsin statute says you have to have. If you are a large municipality, that means you have an official newspaper. You would put a minimum of 2 postings, 1 2 weeks prior to the meeting, 1 1 week prior to the meeting, and you would have that. You would be able to tell the public. For towns, it's a little bit different. You do have 3 options. You could post in 3 public locations. I don't know if, do you know what you do in the town of Oregon?
Yes, yep, I do. We actually kind of do a combination of, we do 3 public locations and town website.
Okay,
So
so bare minimum,
would be one
posting
idea.
outside the door and on your website, perfectly acceptable. There's a Wisconsin statutes 985. It has a whole gobbledygook of stuff, but we synthesized it down. Location should be predetermined and referenced and adopted. We recommend using a separate notice. You know, with the standard format, it's, oh, we got this agenda, we have to post it, but trying to post this agenda 2 weeks in advance is probably unheard of, because it's always changing, you know, until right up until the minimum 3 days of requirement for posting an agenda. So we recommend that, hey, a separate notice gets posted. The notice has to have some minimum information, meeting location, date, time, name of property owner, applicant, address. All that stuff is really important, especially if it goes to court, that you provided this opportunity for people to speak and have a formal public hearing to get all that additional testimony you need to render a decision. Something that is unique to Dane County, we provide neighborhood notices. Anybody within 300 feet of any conditional use permit, we'll send out a mailing to them. It's not a requirement for towns. Some towns do that. Town of Albion, they have the applicant. They're required for any type of zoning change or conditional use permit. They want everybody notified in a half a mile, and it's the applicant's responsibility, and they will give them proof of mailing. So it's as little as that. We have towns that just post in 3 places, one at the park, one at the grocery store, and one at the town hall, and that's it. And that's perfectly acceptable. But all town officials should know, because you know, you have constituents calling, going, hey, I didn't get a neighborhood notice, or, you know, I didn't know about it, and this is unfair. Well, you know, saying that it is fair. We posted in 3 notes, you know, and we're going by the rules. And so town procedures for public hearings do vary, and everybody has their own way of doing things, and that's okay. We do have minimum standards. So I do have one example, and the next slide, please. And this is the town of Dane. They have not had a conditional use permit since I believe 2017, prior to Act 67. So they called up, and Dave, the chair, we came up with a public notice. It's very simple. It tells when it's going to be, where it's going to be, what it's going to be. And then we got to, how should we proceed with this? And they have no formal public policies of how it's all going to act or anything like that. And the town of Dane has a 3 board member, and that's it. They don't have any planning commission. They have a part-time clerk that works mostly from home. And so, I mean, it's a very small town operation. So we got together and we put the rules for the public hearing right on the notice. We're telling everybody, hey, this is how it's going to be. We're going to have oral testimony, and it's going to be at the meeting, and you get 5 minutes to speak. And because they have limited office, there is the only way that you could provide written testimony. You bring 4 copies, paper size, to the town clerk during normal business hours. No faxes, no emails, no texts, no pictures, no movies, no jars of sand. Yes, so it could be very taxing. So because the town clerk really liked this idea that, hey, if you're gonna bring it, and so the rules are right here. Is it gonna be fair? Yes. So there's a lot of different ways of doing it. So you may want to talk about, hey, do we really want to get movies by email, and how are we going to provide that to everybody? So having that, setting the standards are good. These are very simple. It's going to work. Well, April 10th, we'll see how it goes. So, the next slide, please. Establish a plan and stick to that plan. You're going to open up the public test, the written format, whether you're going to take in emails, photos, movies, recordings, or just letters. Who does a written testimony need to be sent to? Can it be sent to the town clerk? Or, do you want it to distribute it to all the planning commission members? I would suggest having everything go to one place, the town clerk, so the town clerk could distribute it to the committee members. When is the information due by? You may say, hey, we're only going to take it until a day before the public hearing, so we could assemble it and everything like that. When will the written testimony part be closed? You could say after the public testimony, or after the public hearing, we're going to stop taking public information, because we got all the information, we got the application, we got the public testimony, we may have staff input and all that collected together to make a decision. And then it's really good to, if you have oral testimony, having the order of the speakers, time limits, you should have the people speaking address the committee. They can't be asking the applicant questions or get in debate with those, because you're not getting out their concerns. The concerns just really need to get on the table, and I'll get into that in a second. Postpone controversial petitions to allow time to deliberation. Sometimes there's 2 hours worth of testimony. You just can't think straight after that. You could take notes and, hey, they had a very valid concern. That was 5 minutes of, my dog's gonna bark too much, and stuff like that. So you could get that stuff down. Also, keeping a folder, it's really good if you go to court, having having that folder so everybody has the information to make a decision. So next slide, please. As Rachel touched on it, the comprehensive plan policies. You may have an attorney for the applicant saying, hey, you don't need to look at your town comp plan, because the Wisconsin statute says you don't have to. And that might be the case in some things, but however, a part of our standards of approval, we do require you to take a look at your town plan policies. Some town policies say, hey, we don't want these. I'll pick on mineral extraction. They don't want those right next to subdivisions, rightfully so. So they have those policies, you have to find somewhere further away. So it's just to keep in mind that you may get an attorney, but it's always good to know you know, what it says in the statutes. Next slide, please. A municipality's discretion is limited under the conditional use permit review. It's a quasi judicial process, meaning that you have to take the evidence. You are the judge, you have the scale. So you get the application in and you put it on the scale. You get public opposition or public testimony. You get it, you know, you get all this information and you kind of decipher, go, okay, these are the bad points. These are the good points about it, and see what actually happens. And maybe, you know, there's some bad points that weigh it down, but maybe with some conditions limiting the hours of operation, it gets a little balanced. Maybe it, you know, you put, you only limit outdoor storage to 50 square feet or something, or have no lights on one side or screening. It'll balance it out. And so when it kind of balances, it's like, oh, it can actually fit into the community. So that's kind of like the goal. It is in the zoning district that, yes, this is a conditional use permit. There's a possibility. Can it really actually work? Identifying the key issues using the application, applicant statements, input from other agencies, staff reports, comments from the public hearing. That's all the testimony that you kind of, unfortunately, got to gather up and kind of sift out and put it on the scale and weigh it and see if conditions could be made. You got to identify the legitimate concerns. A person's dog barking when trucks go past, I don't know, that may be of concern, maybe not. You know, do trucks go past and cargoes past the street all the time? Yes, the dog barks. You know, that's, you're gonna have to weigh what are legitimate concerns. Safety about well contamination. They're doing some highly technical stuff with dangerous chemicals over there. Is it going to affect my groundwater? Well, that's a very legitimate concern that needs to be substantiated. Controversial application should be postponed to provide time to summarize the concerns and see if the concerns can be mitigated. So I'll get into that in a second. County staff can assist in preparing conditions or determining if requested standards, if it meets the standards. We do have one. We do have, I think, yeah, next slide here. Next slide. We do have a worksheet. And the worksheet you could use, it basically has all the 8 standards that applicant has to meet. And then we have these lists of potential nuisances. And, you know, an applicant should address all these if applicable and paint the picture for you. If they don't have this information, ask them for it. Hey, you know, where are your employees going to park? Is it, you know, on the north side, right next to all the single family houses, or can they park on the other side where it would be less of an impact? Are they using any loudspeakers outside? Things like that. We have a nifty little sheet on the back that lists all these potential nuisances. And as the person's talking or you're reviewing the application, you could say, hey, I think it's okay. The applicant says it's from hours are 9 to 5. That's reasonable, you know, okay, that's acceptable. Or, you know, a person saying, well, I'm going to be banging on hammers from 7 p.m. till midnight because I get home at 6 and I eat dinner and I get 7 and I work on machines until midnight. You know, now that I think possibly need more information or possibly failing to meet the standards, because I think that would upset neighbors if banging on hammers at 11, banging, you know, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon may be tolerable, but at midnight, not good. And that could be a grounds for a denial. It's going to fail to meet one of the the standards. Neighboring properties will be substantially impaired. If somebody's banging on banging a hammer at midnight, I think that was any reasonable person would kind of agree to you, with you. So that's a tool that you could use. I'll just kind of put it there. Okay, next thing. Next slide, please. So just to keep in mind that the county ordinances have half the items already taken care of. We do have 13, let's see, we have minimum conditions that we place on all conditional use permits. There's 13 of them. There's the information that they provide, they have to follow. So if they have an operations plan, they show the parking area on the south side and they're parking on the north side, guess what? These conditions that are already set in place on all conditional use permits, I'm gonna go in and say, you need to start parking on the south side. Or else the conditional use permit will be revoked. It has other things that your septic system has to be approved. You have to have permits. If you need licenses, you have to have them. So all these are already set in place. And we did provide this handout to you. I don't have them on a slide because there's 13 of them, but it covers a lot of the stuff. Okay, that's already, somewhat of a concern. There's also special requirements for particular uses, such as mineral extraction. There's another host of maybe a dozen or so conditions specific to mineral extraction. Or we have boarding facilities, animal boarding facilities that have special conditions. What are you going to do with your manure? Distances away from houses and stuff like that, fencing. They're all part of a set standards to help mitigate any potential nuisances. Additional conditions certainly allowed. If the town has a concern or the public goes, hey, there's this legitimate concern. What can you do about it? You could place a condition to help even the scales. The town board or zoning committee may impose any other conditions necessary to meet the standards of the conditional use permit. You could put expiration dates. The town of Middleton had a Airbnb, and the neighborhood was really didn't like it. And so they put a 1-year expiration date and said, hey, we'll see how it goes. If you behave, you could come back in, you could get another conditional use permit for 10 years. Because you proved it. So you could do that. You could limit hours of operation, number of events, size of the building. If you're concerned that business is going to be too big. Okay, well, if it's going to be a small family business, can you work in, oh no, I need 10,000 square feet. Well, that may not fit the neighborhood. So you could play with the scales on a lot of different ways. The conditions do have to be based on legitimate concerns. You can't say, hey, I like the color pink, so you got to paint your color, you got to paint your building pink, because it's kind of arbitrary. And you have to test is, if you can't convince the person on the street that that's a legitimate concern and you addressed it with this legitimate condition, you really shouldn't be putting it on a conditional use permit. They're to mitigate negative impacts, not personal choices. Next slide. Okay. Good conditions are based on substantial evidence presented. It's necessary to mitigate legitimate substantial concerns. Good conditions definitely meet ordinance standards. They have to be enforceable. You're saying that you can only have 5 in 5 patrons a day. That's kind of hard to enforce because I have to sit out there. If it's a coffee shop, that's okay, you know, I could sit there and count people, but you know, but if it's standard retail shop, I don't think I'll be sitting there, so it's kind of hard to enforce. So what I'm getting at is the condition has to be reasonable, you know, and the goal is, can the thing actually fit in the neighborhood? Yeah, maybe the person can't bang on the hammer, you know, until midnight, but maybe he could work on weekends. Maybe he could, you know, on weekends, fix cars from 9 to 5 on Saturday and Sunday and call it a day. And that's where the compromise comes in. If he says, no, I want to go fishing on the weekends, well then, sorry, you can't fit into the neighborhood. And so, and there are some cases and that's going to happen, that a conditional use permit has to be denied because it just is not right to the reasonable person. Okay, once again, you can use the town comprehensive plan policies to set conditions and stuff like that. We do require town policies to be looked at when reviewing a conditional use permit. Okay, so, we're fine. We're at the last slide. I do appreciate all your attention and everything. And so, just to recap everything that rezones and CUPs are different. Rezones open up the door for development. So if you don't want to see all the permitted uses and conditional uses in an area, you should really take a look at the zoning district fact sheet of that zoning district that you're rezoning at that time, because it may, you know, if you're rezoning a residential area and you don't want any commercial, well, put a deed restriction on it at the time of rezoning, because you have the most flexibility of like, hey, you know, we just have a subdivision. We don't want anybody to have Airbnbs. Well, that's kind of a tricky one, but we don't want to have anybody to have a limited family business in the subdivision because we want to common serve. So the time of, you know, looking at all the land uses is the time of rezoning. Because when it gets to CUPs and fine tuning, you know, the goal is to try to make it fit into the neighborhood, you know. But there are times that if the applicant has to have it a certain way, it may not fit. So there is the process. Separate the reviews of rezones and conditional use permits. They're critically important because you have the most flexibility on a rezone. You just need to say, hey, it doesn't meet the comprehensive plan policies. Boom, that's it, done deal. It's going to be supported in court. Rezonings, town boards, and the county have a lot of discretion with regards to rezonings and reasonings why. When you get to a conditional use permit, you better have a really good reason. That's the whole difference. If it comes in a group, separate them. Hey, will all these land uses fit in this area? You could easily say, no, we don't want it because one of them could be potentially the conditional use permit. But then that conditional use permit falls moot. That's it. The zoning isn't there. Your conditional use permit it just vanishes. You don't have a public hearing. We recommend having a formal procedure for CUPs, written down, formally adopted, and consistently followed. Town of Dane is a perfect example. We made it up in 3 minutes, and it's, you know, it's hanging up in 3 places in the town right now, and everybody knows the rules, you know, and that's fair. The last thing is the process, and this is what we've been talking about for a little over an hour now. The things you need to obtain all the testimony, have the public hearing, get people engaged. But then, you know, when it's all engages, it can't keep continuing out. You get the information, You identify the concerns and you close that portion down so you could deliberate. You could use identifying the concerns, you could use the sheet there to see which ones, and everybody could do it. And then afterwards, maybe the next meeting, talk about and say, hey, you know, is this a concern to everybody? And you could just go down the list. Identifying the concerns, you could have the piece of paper. These are our concerns. Applicant, here you go. Here's the concerns. You do the heavy lifting and convince us that you could meet these concerns. So we have concerns that a person is banging their hammer until midnight. What can you do to make that fit into the neighborhood? And then you don't have to go, oh, well, geez, it should be 11:30 or maybe 8:30, or what do you say, Rebecca? You know, 8:45, you know, so that takes it out. What the applicant will do will go, geez, I have to pick a time. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna pick 9 o'clock. And then they're gonna come back to you and you're going to see if that satisfies the concern. You know, we had a concern about a banging hammer. Okay, you came back and said, I'll stop banging hammers at 9 p.m. Well, that seems reasonable. So put the burden of proof on the applicant, what your concerns. And then if it comes back, you got additional information, then render its decision based on facts. You use the 8 standards in which Rachel very detailed and did a great job on explaining. I'm glad we didn't have to do that. And then you got a choice, approve, deny, or if it's too hot, if there's, and because, you know, the towns have, it's very personal. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody deals with everybody. If it's too personal or gets too dicey, take no action. We've had the town of Albion, the town of Dunn, the town of Montrose, the town of Rutland, and 2 other towns that they have taken no action because it was just too intense for the town. It went up to the ZLR committee, and ZLR committee made a decision. They waited. Some were approved, some were denied. But they, you know, we got this information. So we only have like 15 more slides. No, next slide. So I thank everybody for listening. Planning and Development Department, there's our website. Got any questions? Please.
Yeah, so what's your thought on if a CUP should go with the land or with the applicant, the owner?
So the conditional use permit is actually on the activity. So if you issue a conditional use permit, unless you put a condition on it, it goes with the activity. So if it's an amusement park, you know, you do a conditional use permit for amusement park, it's there, it's going, you know, the operator skips the country, another person comes in, as long as it doesn't shut down for a year, it's going to continue to operate unless you're very concerned with the conditional use permit. And there's a lot of them that limited family businesses. Okay, we all know John, he does a good job. I know he's going to stop banging his hammer at 9 p.m. Totally agree, but I may not know about the next person. So a condition is it's limited to John. And so you could do that. You could put a expiration date on it as well. So there's ways of getting to your concern. But if you do not address that during the conditional use permit, it's going to go on as long as the activity meets the conditions that you impose on it.
And even if it's not the original applicant, it could go 3 owners in doing the same activity.
Yep. Yep. We have some mineral extraction sites that have 5, 6 owners, unless you limit it to an owner. There are some that are limited to the owner because we know the operation and it's going to be limited to that criteria. Okay,
I have one real quick question.
Yeah.
If the town says no, does ZLR still get another kick at it and decide which way they want?
no.
Okay.
So that's it. So the town has veto authority and it's very unique that, and that's why you need a class 2 and get all the testimony and render your decision. Suggest that, if it's swaying in the way of, denial, if there's a lot too many concerns, Aqua County staff, so we come up with a plan. But if you deny it, it's dead. It's null and void.
Say no action, ZLR gets a kick at it.
That is correct.
Okay.
That a decision has to be rendered on a conditional use permit.
Thank you.
Good questions. Anything else?
I'd just like to thank you on behalf of the town for you and Rachel to come in and give us this presentation. It's very nice of you.
No problem. That's here we are. The town and, and if you need information, we're here. 266-4266, Roger Lane, Rachel Holloway.
We've got your number in here.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
That concludes item 6 on our agenda tonight. Number 7 is communications. Are there any?
I'm gonna be at the next meeting. They'll be on the town.
All right.
We're still doing this, we're still doing that. I know it's late. There was a lot of movements. Yes, I have it as a week later because the annual meeting's on the.
Yeah. So I would.
Continue on.
maybe
Fingers
do
crossed.
it, like,
What's the date?
I just wanna bet.
Yeah, I have a Tuesday, April 25th, 6:30 PM postponed plan commission. Is that right? Okay. You know what? I'm not gonna be here either.
Okay, so that's 3 down.
We can proceed. With
We can proceed with 4 people, but it's whether you decide to proceed or not, which is very easily, you could say, if there's only gonna be 4 and we don't have a petition before us, we would like to cancel that April meeting.
I would have a petition, though, that's filed.
Do what the town did, instead it's to vote on it, it would be an equal vote and they wouldn't have a tiebreaker, and so they kicked the planning meeting.
Oh,
Excuse if you need it.
can we, what do you suggest, Steph? Can we weigh in? And sounds like Chuck's plans are tentative.
Well,
Maybe
do
Gina's are tentative.
as you, whatever you would wish to do. You
Is there an
can keep it on
alternative
the,
date?
you
We
can
agree on?
keep it on the books for now as well, and then kind of see what
Is that okay with everyone?
comes up.
Keep it on the books for now.
And if nothing comes up, you can say, okay, well, since there's only gonna be a few of you, we don't have to have the meeting, or.
We still have to fix a date for the work session. That has to. Well, should we talk about that now while we're in session? or-
Probably should.
All right. Our Tuesday nights generally okay for everybody. So yeah, a work session.
The only issue with Tuesday nights is for April is
They're kind of gone.
so that's just for April, but they're gone.
Well, there's election,
Yeah, we have no Tuesday
town board,
nights.
annual meeting, all on Tuesday nights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no Tuesday nights available in April left, besides the one that we were going to meet on, which we potentially might not.
Our Thursday's potential.
I think Thursday, there is one group that meets on Thursdays here, and I believe it's only once a month, so I'll leave back here to see when that is. It is. It's like the 3rd Tuesday of the month, so it's in April. So this month they already met.
How about Wednesdays? Anybody do better on Wednesdays? Or worse?
I may have to show up later if it's a Wednesday.
like senators.
Wednesday is just one a month, is Anderson Park meets here. The second Wednesday. of the month, I believe. We got Thursdays, oh, I'm sorry, so the first and third Thursday of each month, we have meetings here that are not ours.
Well, Wednesday, April 19th.
April one.
19th.
We also have housing sustainability panel. But also
Is in the agenda for the work session would be the.
No,
Pardon?
April 19th is taken. That's when the Friends meet of Anderson Park.
Here in this location.
Yep.
The agenda would be to discuss
Density.
density. Discuss density.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
I'll just postpone it one day to Wednesday, April 26th.
I'm out of town,
So
so.
you're still gone. Okay.
You gotta go the rest of that week. Your Monday.
Monday, May Day, May 1st. It's my half birthday. It'll be cake.
I love when you know that off the top of your head.
It's a family tradition. Because it doesn't really count, you don't get older, you just have a birthday.
Oh, so you're 61 and a half.
I don't like it.
You got it. All right, Wednesday, May 3,
what time, 6:30 or?
6:30 is the usual start. Dave's got something going that, Harlan? Which, hey, people are nodding for this. Wednesday, May 3. We be sober? That's all.
It's okay to be late.
Not me, but if there's only one person, that's less.
It does sound a little bit more. You can't make it on once or that one.
I'm kind of tentative, but technically out. Before that week of April.
I guess I've been assuming this is for the work session rather than the actual meeting. Is that what you guys are thinking?
That's what I thought you were talking about.
Yeah, I am, because Gina, if you got some ideas, and I would encourage you to give them to me, I can present your ideas during the work session. Because we're not going to be able to take official action anyway. In terms of voting.
Right, like she could maybe write a memo that says what her thoughts are on density. And then in return, if you record the meeting,
Read that.
she can listen to it
Oh.
to find out what, you know, the topics that were discussed or how that went,
Right with you?
if that's.
May 3rd? May 3rd? Just, okay, 6:30 Wednesday, May 3rd, understanding that Gina probably won't be here and Dave will be a little late, but sober.
Then when's our meeting in May? That would be.
Usually the third.
Yeah, there is no conflict in May.
There's no conflict.
No, so it would be the
16th.
third, and I don't. Fortunately, my calendar's on the week basis right now, so.
Yeah, the
we get
16th.
there,
May 16th?
May
Well,
16th
whatever,
will be
the
our next
3rd.
regular meeting,
the Tuesday is 23rd. Or I'm sorry, 16th.
16th.
There you go. That's
And we've got a 25th of,
May 16th?
That'll be our next regular meeting. That stays on the schedule.
the 25th of April is also the tentative.
For now, yeah.
Yeah, we'll keep it on, and then if something pops up in the meantime, I mean, you will only have 4 people here.
Oh, so May 16th and April.
Yeah.
10th.
You got those down there and stuff so they can be reflected.
May 16th is the regular meeting, May 3rd, Wednesday, is a work session.
Is a work session. Which, well, that's formal and the public is invited but will not participate.
And Stephanie does not attend work sessions.
You do not, no, we take
Correct.
care of things without you. Because Harlan's got a key, right?
I would hope so.
I gotta remember to bring it.
Good thing you don't live too far away.
I did.
Okay, and we'll limit our business at the work session to density. Or general topic. Not gonna.
Yes, you just talk about that topic, and if you need anything from me to provide you guys before that date, I will set everything up for you guys. I just don't attend work sessions unless you ask.
Is it required or that we have it open for people who wish to listen and watch by Zoom?
No, it is not. I usually put a recorder out for you so that you can record it for, you guys' use, our use. But usually we don't do this.
But if at the April meeting, the 25th, I don't think it would be helpful, I think, to remind everybody of the work session and have a little bit of if there can be some help to get the focus on what it is we're talking about.
I'm thinking of sending out an email to the 7 of us.
Okay, good.
And just say, remember, this is what we're gonna talk about. I appreciate getting your ideas. All issues are on the table for discussion. The objective is, generally speaking, is what Sharon and the others have commented on, and that is we use the E word as an exception. How can we treat exceptional cases without having to change the whole thing? Okay. Is that kind of sum it up? I foresee that everybody's going to try to make themselves into an exception, but that's one of the things we can talk about in our. Zip to your lip. Is that what you're saying?
I'm just waiting for you to call the next item.
She's
Okay.
very anxious for his role.
All right, that concludes communications. Thanks for your cooperation coming out with some dates. Item number 8, town board items, Arlen Kai.
Two things. The motion that we made last time was to recommend approval of the comprehensive plan, and that we provided the red and blue maps of the red identified legacy properties, and the blue are the ones that are approved now that could be divided and are also included in the next plan. The board, missing the chair of the family emergency, board is reluctant to approve the plan or to have an opinion on the red and blue lots. The options were to say, no, we don't want to do the red. We want to do the red, or we want to send this back to the plan commission to figure out how to include the red or not. So that didn't happen. The feeling was that the April meeting, it will be brought up. Don't know if it's going to be addressed or turned over to the new board for action.
So it was postponed.
It was postponed to the April board meeting. And it was, and right now there's discussion. Jennifer, I guess, talked to Wayne that we can't speak for him, for his vote, but
Sure.
if, let's say it's just possible that that decision may be pushed
Sure.
to the new board.
Okay.
Questions?
So was it I recall. I'm asking for clarification on what this commission had in mind. As far as I know we were asking the board to approve going to the next step with the comprehensive plan. What I got confused about in the town board meeting audience was the idea of folding in scenario 1 or scenario 2, the new one with the legacy old rights, land use rights. Was that our intention, or did that just something that a motion that the board made because they wanted to act on that?
The motion that what we put forward was to approve the comprehensive plan.
As it was.
End of issue. Second issue was scenario 1 or scenario 2, which had the red and the legacy lots or just the current divisible lots that are in the current plan, the blue. That was requested, we provided that. So the board had the ability to say, fine, we accept the plan. And we can stick with scenario 1, which is just the blue lots, it's a possibility. Or they say, back to the drawing board, incorporate the red and the blue. And they deferred that to the April meeting and possibly beyond.
Because I guess I was under the impression that we were providing that the county had provided the scenario 1, the scenario 2. So informationally, because
Those are
that had been
informational.
come out of the discussion that we'd had in the joint meeting. And so I guess I had anticipated that it would be sort of discussed more on the board level. I guess it will be now. Anyways, I don't want to split hairs or take up more time. I was surprised that it had almost come to a vote on.
So it didn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I was glad it didn't, because I felt like if it was informational, then I assumed that there would be discussion about it rather than voting. Immediate voting.
That's right.
Yeah.
They can get kicked down the road. No decision. No decision. Anything else on? Okay. Second thing, the Jerry Jensen parcel. We have not, needs to have a development agreement, which we haven't, Jennifer was saying that we have not had one since the last subdivision. Since we are amending a subdivision or extending a subdivision, we're back in having a developer agreement. You are going to be, if you haven't already, you're going to be receiving a copy of a development agreement that Jerry Jensen has provided. You will be provided with the land division and subdivision code, which we would be directing your attention to pages 11 and 16. That has a description of what should be in the development agreement. And you page 1125, which would have the streets design and construction that are required. And there is also the administration and fees on page 1114. So those are places. It's a nice thick thing, and it's probably very good if you have insomnia to be going through all 36 pages. So those are the highlights. But we would need for the next plan commission meeting or a work session, depend. Please read these, to be prepared for that. Jennifer was sent, or you were sending them out?
What? With Jennifer.
We can't discuss this at the work session because it's not related to
I
Jensen.
know, we got a work session.
Not necessarily. You can discuss whatever you put on the agenda of the work session. So if you wanted to add something like
No,
that, you could have one topic, 2 topics, 10 topics. It's whatever you guys decide on.
If you please read these over, we're having a plan commission meeting before the work session, so maybe we can hammer this out line by line. Or if we don't have enough people, it may take 2 sessions. Or whatever, but please read them. So that
I'm
you're
gonna get that
familiar
via
with
email.
the developer agreement
If you haven't
and the
already.
standards that are our ordinance. For the land division and subdivision code of the town of Oregon, which is Title 11.
Okay, so we'll watch your by email, right, Steph?
I wasn't privy to the conversation. I'm assuming that Jennifer is preparing something or she'll ask me to. This just happened today.
Okay, yeah,
They
please
can-
check with her.
a meeting.
Did she send out within the last year? She might have sent something.
Might know. That's why I can't really say talk on it.
Okay, she still had something out.
Green County zoning.
It's your Justin's property, yeah.
Yeah, I remember it was the CLR's response. So you're saying this stuff is in that response buried?
It's a separate document that Jerry brought in. Said, Jerry, I got this. So
We can, or we have the ability, or we are supposed to be approving the developer agreement, which does not include the engineering drawings of the road, does not have the final, does not have all the final details. But this is one of the first things to be done according to Jennifer and the definitions. If you see something different in there, let me know. That's it.
that's it. Thank you for your report, Alan. Do we have a motion? Looking at you, Sharon.
I make a motion for the meeting to adjourn.
Is there a second?
A second.
I'll second. Thank you, David. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Okay with you?
I'm tired.
Your endurance is amazing.
I'm just glad I can make it back. I mean, I had to take what, a 6-month hiatus because of everything like that? Did you guys miss me?
Was it? Nice to see you there.
Hopefully I can continue to make.
Stack of chairs tonight.
No.
This was a,
I think some of the, I don't know what's happening.
yes,
Okay.
there was something about the,
No, but yeah, they were right now. Next year.
Yeah. So for my
It's
zoning,
it's just very.
do I have to
it's
ask the
the
town
first
board
one
to
that
go
makes the
motion
vote
on?
very clear.
Include it in their
Instead of following,
comprehensive plan?
someone following.
Side.
this.
Well, they did.
Yeah.